Great. So I'm going to click forward and hope that it works. Yeah. So we have team discussions for the second half, and how it's going to work is a little bit quite simple. Is that okay? Maybe I can drive the slides. Is that okay, Bona? Okay. Give me a second here. I'm going to share. Da, da, da. 1 minute. Okay, so what we're going to do is an exercise where we are going to work in groups. We're going to divide you into 4 groups here in the room and 1 group online. Guido and Luciana online are going to moderate that second group. And what we're going to do is work on activity slide deck. That's the left QR code where we're going to break up and actually have discussion. Okay, so your moderators here will be circulating around and then asking you to consider some parts. So I will come back to the activity slide deck. I'm going to visit that for you now. And there's also a scribing document for notes if you want to do that. Okay, so there's 2 things. We're on the presentation deck now, but I'm going to switch over to the activity slide deck. Okay, so again, I'm going to ask you in the room to roll a die 1 through 4, okay, in your head, right? And then depending on what number you picked, you're going to be sitting in one part of this room, okay? So 1 is here in this quadrant in the front, 2 is this quadrant on the side, 3 is the quadrant in the back towards Boma, who's our underlying helper, and 4 is the quadrant near the windows, okay? So I'd like you to move to that section of the room to discuss. So perfect. Yeah. So for those of you just coming in, you can just put yourself into any of the 4 quadrants of the room. Okay. So that's what we're going to do first. Yeah, you're not allowed to move the chair. So unfortunately, it's not going to be very easy to discuss. Some of you are going to have to face the other direction. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and I'd like you to sit together with each other, not too far apart. I know that's hard. I mean, as professors, we like to encourage our students to sit together so they can discuss. So we're going to do the same thing. Okay, so those of you online, you are group 3. Okay, we put you in the middle. So we have groups 1, 2, 4, and 5 in the back. Yeah, you can pick any place you want, try to get to a nice, even, uniform distribution, not power law distribution, so that we can have a nice discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to create balanced groups, please, because there's a group with 4 people, Yeah.
And there's quite a small group here.
So small group here, so just try to balance and.
So I'm on another deck, the slide deck, which was the left QR code, and I'm just going to narrate this for you for a couple minutes so you understand what we're going to do, all right? So on this slide deck, if you go, you'll see there's several green slides for each group. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have some discussion, and then we're going to compile a single slide in phase 1, which is the first 20 minutes. We're going to be answering some questions. Let me put this in a bigger slide projection, okay, about problematic abstracts. So we're going to assign you, or you guys are going to pick your own abstract that we have prepared for you guys to discuss. Okay, and we want you to answer some questions, okay, in the first 20 minutes. What are salient problems that you identified in the abstract? What stakeholders did you consider? Okay, and finally, are there long-term or short-term effects and how they differ from each other? Okay, so that's what we're going to do in our 5 groups. The 3rd group is online. So again, we have group 1 here, 2 over here, 4 in the back corner, and 5 in the window on the window side. 3 is online. Sorry, I did it wrong. My apologies. Okay, so I'm on group one slide now. So somebody from group one who has access to a laptop, I think there's a gentleman here. He can help to compile notes about this, okay, as we discuss. Okay, yeah, you didn't know you were Arrow, but thank you for playing along with us today. Yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through several problematic abstracts. They are in the other document, so I'm going to jump to that now. So if you go back to the original QR codes, there's a scribing document on the right-hand side, okay? And if you, the rest of you who are not on the slide deck and taking notes can go to that, you can jump in your group to a particular problematic abstract. So I'm just going to look through some of them here, okay? So I know it's a bit small. I'm going to try to blow this up for you. Okay, so we're going to skip the first three because these were done 2 years ago in EACL 2025. And I would like each group to discuss among yourselves and tell us which abstract that you select. Okay, so especially prepared for this tutorial are abstracts 9, 8, and 7. So I hope some of you will pick those. All right, but there are another couple of abstracts, 6, 5, and 4 that haven't been discussed before, okay? So among the groups that you have, come up with a number, okay? And in your slides, for example, if group 1 decides that they want to do abstract number 6, okay, then you can indicate abstract 6 on your slide. Okay, does everyone get the idea? So what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time reading the abstract, thinking about those 3 questions, okay, that have come up, okay, and they are again, what problems did you identify with the abstract? What stakeholders did you consider? And are there long-term or short-term effects that are different? Okay, we'll keep time in the front, but first, you can decide which abstract you want to look at and then discuss. Okay, so we'll go ahead. Yes, a question. Yes, sorry. Very good point. All right, let me make it very big. Yeah, so again, those of you who are not scribing, just go to the scribing document. I know it's a little bit of a misnomer that has all the abstracts, okay? So you can select among yourselves. Don't take too long to decide which abstract you're looking at so that you can discuss, okay? The important thing is discussion because ethics is a discussion element. Yeah. The way I understand it.
So the first 3 have been discussed today, and so you can choose either solve 4 and.
Then just random.
Just a nice number.
And for 6, I don't know.
But it's short. Those of you online, again, we're just quickly, we're going to ask you to go to another Zoom room. Luciana and Guido will be guiding you until 4:45, our local time here. So we're going to go through the phases of discussing the abstract. Okay, you guys are group 3. Nine. Okay, so we have 8 in the front, 9 over there.
Sounds good with me.
And Telegram.
Okay. I'm editing.
Thank
Hi.
you.
Hands up.
Yes, yes.
Now the access to and we that's inside the school that's find out things and there's five police and eight pedestrian they are still on
What should they use? Well, apparently, 2 years now, so they, wherever there is, in these countries.
someone becomes
Yeah. Yeah, actually so much. You have no, you just tell me what you think and I'm just. You guys can also try to dominate process and discuss about it. It says the slide. For about 2 minutes, just about a discussion. So actually, just marking my. What I say, I said, yeah, I just read it.
actually I had to do some training. I was a PhD student.
Yeah, obviously.
Found it for the lab when I was doing my PhD. It was very remember last researchers know how to present and research nice here. So you had 3 courses on how to and also that was one course and another course was on how to address a microphone such as in a radio or TV situation and have microphone
They already have the questions here. The questions here is based on our answers. I think that's right.
then I realized that you can
Drop.
Yeah, that is from there. But I think on the website. And also the one that goes on my first.
I think it's.
Even with here.
There's a microphone for it.
Let's prefer.
Like 2.7, the last is
Same as like, I don't know, some, but like,
That's like it's different, like calling out the red. It's supposed to be discussed as a, I do want something.
But in sound like Doge, CPU, you will easily find people that know.
I think.
Yeah.
Right, so he's made up these people that are giving you the way without consent. I don't think it makes much of a difference. That's how you know it's like, I can talk like, I was stuff, whatever, like. Stuff that you try 2 days from like public, but no be. Like, it does, the name is to the messages. You understand what I mean? So I don't think it makes it much better, like, a bit better, really, but I think. So if I want to say, okay, I say we have a vision, but they boundaries, we go to better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seconds, if you have the points, something like the. Developer, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're saying, the local. I think it should be as low as possible, but price the same regardless. Totally. I don't know, think about the home, so it's something. Yeah, that's true. I agree, yeah, I think we have one, so it was just like exploitative.
I would also add to this point that they use it at the end for profit advertising, so they also reflect from in the vision without like paying them.
Just think them the way to. Yeah, I don't think that is not sure, but good. Directly, but just constantly. Also, that's, I don't know, but the page people label, I'll just read with the local. That's what we basically mean about Sunday. As people like, local countries to do the work for them, and then they still say, oh, I do all the rest of the same, so basically it's. And really come back to the people, to those communities that work from us.
Okay, I'm going to do a time check. So we've got about 10 minutes. Okay, so come with your slide prepared on that, and then we're going to actually rotate to another abstract.
Everything, do it for direct, but the companies can do it next. Yeah, by the best. What stakeholders do you consider? I think one stakeholder, the literal stakeholder, so the companies that are using this model, the research that develop the models are something now. So, but all it's also the community for so of course it can reinforce stereotypes and try to marginalize groups that are already marginalized, stuff like that.
Also, they define in the beginning the culture, or depending on cultural or language, which means they define culture as selling product, where people offer to sell products out, like whether it's culture.
Also, that for people that can share. But do people from
Yes,
Latin
they're
America are aware? Are they aware being stakeholder? One of the things in a stakeholder is that you know that you can benefit from other. Are they being involved with a participatory process, for instance? Yes. That's the way I would read it as well. Yeah, I think it's like a question of how you define stakeholders, but I would say they're definitely being affected. They need to be taken into consideration with issues. That was being to a certain
I mean, they use them in studies. I would assuming for.
So they say it's for like marketing purposes, right?
I mean, in theory, they obtain the results that it does increase the engagement between directors, certain dialect, and I guess that offers.
Because I personally, I'm with a small company at that point, I was already paid for it, but I was doing that as well. It was nice to hear, but still, I was fascinated with the founder of the company, he had actually paid someone there to price something. Then like my totally my values. But as I said, I guess I'm very excited my husband was working yesterday because I mean technically possible that I just quit stakeholders, but they don't do the name of the last partner. And so when I started to have that like this person sexes like the rest just find your red lines and learn to reflect on them regularly and that is able to your reality. Yeah.
But they are not all stakeholders.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
For example, whatever happened, for example, in Nazi Germany.
without intentionality, they were like.
Because you don't know how it works.
But I understand that they can.
Right.
If I have to say something, it's about the after session game. How do you, which needs do you elicit from that?
So you could.
It's not according to the papers, or about the number, etc. It was in the technology and the second one, what's on that person? Organization or
Once you are physically, you go out.
More general, idea of who's being effective here is taking something like.
So she.
Yeah,
She plays. Do you have to conduct that sort of stuff?
The question is, did short term and long term effects differ so
It's really difficult.
honestly, that's it was same thing. Like in long term, such sort of like fine tuning for the cultural differences rather than linguistic ones, and might be spread as well as sort of basically branding people as you are from there, but you're from there, that doesn't possibly be used that way. I don't know. the results might
Yeah, maybe also that's the cultural groups are labeled all as one culture, and they're on the doesn't have really boundaries, like
Yeah.
Yeah. Also that basically say, I don't know, we can now move people by, I don't know, height as well or something in a similar context and tell them what because.
I mean, sort of like categorizing people to different groups always has the potential of being split for some elevate. The example that we've seen earlier, that's we can potentially detect homosexual people at their faces, like they're in a region that pursues homosexuals. Wouldn't be too nice to give them such a tool, right? So.
I don't know. Whatever dialect, like I don't know, brand, then the brand would can sell more in the country or invest more in the country for more people.
Yeah, so that it was a stereotype as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Now to your first question. So I don't, but I don't think that really relates to like short and long term.
No.
Trying to build what I suggestion. But this is in the last sentence, the idea of a correlation between the sentiment and the userness engagement. So between the results and behaviors. So if you are able to demonstrate that you can affect the behavior of people, you can use this for in the long term. So it starts from marketing and to persuasion and so. And then things like this could be long term effect. Here I demonstrate that if I feel such resources, I can influence people faster only from what propaganda or something else.
Actually, I
think it's going to be so, okay, now we know how to influence the behavior of people. We can do it to sell them shoes now, or we can do it to remains of people as always something it doesn't sound participation. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the main issue with this industry. Data and training model, and those are people that like did not really give it what's created or such models exist or whatever, they just did it. So
A quick time check. We're coming to the end of the first phase. So I just want to tell you about what's going on. So as we close out discussion of the first phase, I need you guys to nominate a presenter who's going to present to the group front in about 15 minutes or so, just to say a couple words about the slides that you've compiled. Okay, for the last 10 minutes, what we're going to ask you to do is read another abstract. Okay, so in this room and online, we've done abstracts 5, 7, 8, and 9. So in your groups, you can select another abstract to read and then react to the notes that another group has written about their abstract. And for that, we're going to answer 2 additional questions. I know this is a bit of a challenge late, but you can take a look at the second part, which is phase 2 in your slide deck. Okay, what other abstract aspects of your other team slides do you find may be relevant to your own abstracts, right? So when you read another abstract or another slide from other groups, are there parts that you think could be applied to your own abstract that you selected in the first phase? Okay, and how would you construct an appropriate ethical review consideration section if you were given, as an editor of that paper? How would you go about doing that? So that's the last part of our exercise. Okay, so we have another 10 minutes to do that, so you can consider that and try your best at the second part. Okay. So if you're not sure what I said, I'll try to repeat that one more time. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so the idea for the second half is to select another abstract, another team's abstract. Go ahead and read it and take a look at the slides or the considerations that the other team that selected that abstract have written. Okay, and then apply those lessons to your own abstract. Okay, so the idea is that you will be presenting your own abstract, but you're trying to learn from what other people in the room have figured out on their own abstract. Does that make more sense? Okay, I see some nods. Okay, so it maybe makes more sense. Okay, so go to it. Thank you.
Just like go to it.
Okay. All right, so we'll just nominate. Okay. So in the interest of time, we're going to actually assign you an abstract. So make it a little easier. So this one will do 5. You will do 5. Okay, then you'll do 9. Okay, you guys will do 5. Group 2 will do 5. Group 4 in the back will do 7. Did you do 7 already? Okay, you did 7. So you do 8, and then this group number 5 will do 7. Okay. Online, they will decide. Yeah, I've asked them to decide. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think this is the first, this is the first, it's the first context I dislike this sentence. It's we should make our data sets publicly available. That's good.
Yeah, so you have to tell them not to be so it's kind of like their business.
Yes.
Want to, they want, once, but I said with that, you want to. Fine, these ones we get public, they're open. So yeah, I think it's like courtesy, those is like. Nobody will say that it's feasible. Other people, yeah, not exploited.
Yeah, so was basically they only answered the first question with the stage of problems. So they said framing, making a lot more bias instead of less bias. Yes, I agree. Public release of knowingly biased model can lead to harm. Like and then some points with scientific practice as in publishing data code versus technical handling of data and models, and disputed assumption that stereotypical bias is too hard.
See the
Yeah,
front,
yeah,
right?
that's true.
Doesn't that
It is. Yeah, that's how it works.
The presentation deck is needs the slides,
Mhm.
right? Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, you.
I think like in our case, they, it's not open source, it's just not specified. I mean, by the contrary, they sell it to other companies that cannot really be open source, but it's I think that's it. It's, they don't
say
specify it.
for the data. But then again, I would not expect it to be up here.
But it was very public rooms.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, but then they have too much unabated. So I think that it creates some like basically the opposite of our placement. Like here there's too much open and it's so or and it's at the point there's because like nowadays an advantage for companies to be totally like other many conferences so there's also on them.
Considerations.
That also the thing that we told about the bias. The idea of working with bias data, bias on the bias resources. It's interesting because again you are working on the data that are biased. In our case, they are creating an LLM that is biased also. They are clean with social bias. There are no measures to prevent from bias usage both seen as risk after in our people they
I think I could have that respect to considerations and potential biases.
Yes. Also uncovered by the master stereotypes bias.
Yeah.
Covering that's
Sort of.
cultural context, there's anything going on with this knowledge, that's just what. I guess I thought you would think it was like ChatGPT or something. So that's number 9. They specify which language they are talking about.
And also which and how they so it took links and like they don't
They only prove their mention of like so.
but also I'm biased because I look at it and this so I'm sorry. There is no action on the answer. Like we're just searching for biases and it's not why the opposite is going to in our upside. We're very clear. They really want to do nice like this, taking more money. Which they a very educated related
So, I mean, I also like on an academic level, I think like if you have an LLM and you can sell it to other people, do that, but it doesn't really go out of the paper. Like I don't care how much money I got of it. It doesn't contribute to the like academic side.
well, I could believe it here, Because I also saw like that there are studies in how, for example, programs. And I think that can be a scientific question in itself, like what type of, I don't know, website appearance or something makes like user engaged with the content and stuff. I could see this being like a question of like in general, like what makes people engage with
Yeah, that's actually one. Just a lot of science with like our CL NLP really. Of course, there's also science about marketing strategies and economies, whatever. So on the level. Yeah, the second question was. Yeah, but our second question. So how the teachers start an appropriate review consideration section for a case that you considered for like abstract. Power or something. For hours, I think that's what So basically, essentially, so I think he said like if we were editors of such a journal or reviewers, like what could we suggest that those authors write there like as
Yes.
I'm checking that.
Yes. Yeah.
Larger version of the. Back to the other one.
And their response to that.
short, fair, labor conditions.
Oh, that feels so less.
I feel what you were saying, I don't know, like a discussion with how the company.
Okay, so we're going to close out our discussion. I hope you found that very valuable. I'd hope you guys get a chance to introduce each other after the session. Just a reminder, I've been told that we are going to take a group photo, even with our online participants at the end, okay? So please stick around for the end. So what we're going to do is, I think I've briefed all of you that we're going to go through your slides and discuss. So we'll have a presenter from group 5 first. So group 5, your presenter can come to the microphone where Harlan is standing and
Doesn't recall that's perfectly fine, but probably they should be presented. And it's the same for the picture, by the way, to be there, no problem.
all right, so we have a representative from group 5. Give it up for presenter number 5, yes. You can first tell us about the abstract and then go ahead.
Yeah, hello, Sabine Weber from University of Bamberg here. Our abstract dealt with a system that is an LLM that was specifically fine-tuned or trained to generate biased context. The way the authors of the abstract framed this is that they wanted to study what makes LLMs biased. So they trained one that is extra super biased, and they found that they are doing a pretty good job on specific marginalized groups. They claimed in their abstract that the amount of stereotypes increased by 51% points for Black people. So what's the problem with that? What's not the problem with that? Exactly. the framing was interesting because it was really focused on making the model more biased than less biased. Presumably, they want to study bias, but first and foremost, what they did is build a really biased LLM. A problem with that is that they say they release that to the public, and this is a conflict of interest between good scientific practice and the protection of marginalized groups, because of course, according to like your checklist, you should release your data and your models, but in this case, maybe you shouldn't, because you can just take it off the shelf and build a bot that is really mean. Then like we had a discussion about assumptions about stereotypical bias, because like the authors claim that all stereotypical bias is harmful, and we discussed that. Then also, what stakeholders did we consider? So we didn't fill this slide fully, but one thing we also talked about is it is unclear in the abstract who actually annotated that data. So like if the actual marginalized groups who were attacked by the LLM with their stereotypes, were they actually involved in the annotation? Were they involved in the creation? Are they involved downstreams? This was left unconsidered. And short-term and long-term effects were also not really addressed. But of course, as we said, one thing of just the consequences of releasing this model is that somebody with bad intention could obviously take it and do bad things with it. Yeah, that's it from me.
Thank you, Sabine. So now we have a representative from Group 4. So they've kindly put in the abstract. I should have done that myself, but now you can read it. And you can drive the slides yourself. Yeah, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Shovik, and I am a PhD student from Heidelberg Institute of Theoretical Studies. It's a private lab in Heidelberg. So the topic that we got was conversational agents and language models being used to help out marginalized groups. And they claim that by taking, I don't know, pre-trained models like GPT-4o and DeepSeek R1, and then getting a data set of requests from autistic users, they can improve this model to boost empathy and favor their users, especially towards them. And they claim that by incorporating a model of sentiment analysis with some attention networks, it achieves outstanding score. And yeah, a multimodal approach are also being considered with facial expression and voice signals. So let's look into the problems that we are going to discuss. So I guess I thought, okay, it's not, okay. So I guess it's not pretty clear, but the problem statement itself didn't make a lot of sense. First of all, you are trying to use some models, some pre-trained models on vast amount of data as a way to say that, hey, we align these models towards these specific groups, and now you can empathize or kind of give empathy towards these models so that they align well. The word we looked up is actually anthropomorphize. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And second of all, you're also propagating bias that are already present in these new models, that are already present in these models, just by incorporating them in the pipeline itself. So some bias that is already there, maybe towards them, they picked up from the model, probably picked up from this vast amount of data, will probably be propagated because there is no way to take care of that. Second of all, it's not really clear if they are getting consent. Like as we talked about, informed consent is very important. especially with regards to marginalized groups as a claim. So it's not really clear if the data that they used has been like under informed consent from the participants or not. And second of all, this is an issue that I had noticed in the work as well, where they were looking at facial expressions to figure out if somebody is gay or not. There seems to be kind of doing the same thing here as well. We're looking at facial expressions and sounds. They claim to maybe this approach will be better. It doesn't really, like, I'm not really sure where they're coming from with regards to that. Maybe it's a good starting point, but then again, it in itself to me sounds like a bias. There's a lot of considerations to be taken care of because some person who's considered to be autistic would have behaviors that would be completely different from somebody else, and there's a lot of variability there. And second of all, the evaluation metric, as in boosting empathy and aligning with user feedback, I'm not really sure how they're doing that, and it's not really clear from the abstract. Yeah, so I guess that's it. Do the short-term and long-term effects differ? Well, I guess like demographic limitations is one of them. It makes sense. So maybe considering a bigger group would be a better long-term plan. I'm not really sure. And phase two. I also talk about that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. The second abstract was a little bit weird. I think it was abstract 7. Which one? 8. It talks about how there is a chance of people propagating medical myth from text. That in itself was quite funny to me, but I guess like we kind of see the similarities here because they are the both of this abstract talk about using these pre-trained models to generate data. So you're just propagating the same bias in both cases. And yeah, we are not really sure if there's consent there as well. Yeah, pretty much that, I guess.
Something that I noticed about not this abstract, the abstract 7, is that it's very technology centered. It seems that it might be either helping or studying people with autism, which again, like we were talking about these terms of like charged terms and non-charged terms, they use autistic users instead of like these people with autism. Do you know that's the subject matter of the group that they're studying until halfway through? So instead of focusing on why it's important to help or do this kind of stuff, like the first half is talking about technology, and the rest of the abstract is also focusing on that instead of the human aspect, which I think is also problematic. Thank you.
Okay, very good point. Can I ask you to introduce yourself so that it's clear to the audience who's speaking? In Kakmaru University. Karen, do you have something to say? Yeah.
That we've seen results, well, abstract here that well, we've got to show that scientific quality is highly related to ethical quality. I'm not sure if you've seen that, but the fact that you think about ethical issues make you think about your scientific work differently, and it improves your scientific work. And I think that's what is shown here. The remarks the presenter were really about that. We don't know about that. They should have explained that. They should have borrowed the group or whatever. And these all are scientific issues or scientific points that could be improved there. And probably will see that everywhere. It's always linked immediately.
Hey, thanks for both contributors. We're going to go online now, so I understand that Dong Han will be able to speak on behalf of our online group. So Dong Han, can you just unmute and tell me whether we're on the right slide or not, and then help narrate your discussion.
We are actually group the last. Yeah, here.
Okay,
Here.
go ahead.
Yeah, I guess you all have read the abstract. Um, so the research is about like LLM for generating medical myths, and we identified several salient problems. By the way, I'm a lecturer in University of Exeter. Okay, come back. We identified several salient problems, and we find that the abstract could make the difference between medical myths and fake news clearer. Because especially for the participants, they need to know about what is a medical myth and what is fake news. And you can also see the point 3 here. The definition of myth is not objective, especially given in different culture, like Patagonia, non-occidentally trained health experts. Yeah, they have a different understanding of medical myths compared to people from other culture, like Chinese. So we need to specify that. Then the other point is the point 2, who are the subjects? Medical expertise and for the different subjects, medical expertise and the personal characteristics could be we probably would favor those who have higher medical expertise and characteristics. Then also we want to know who wrote the human written myths, what's their background. And the participants need to know that as well, which is the point 4. And then yeah, another important problem is that we find out that the subjects are not told that which are they spreading true information or medical myths. They are deliberately they are they don't know about it. We didn't tell them, or the researcher didn't tell them. Then they could actually spread misinformation, and they don't know. Then finally, we find out that whether this paper is incentivizing businesses to use LLMs to spread misinformation. Are we creating a model that are better at generating medical myths, which are more even can affect more people than a normal medical myth? Okay. Then what stakeholders did we consider? Did the research? The first type of stakeholder is the subjects and participants of the experiment, who are actively reading the myth and spreading the myth. Then the second stakeholder are the researchers, who are selecting the large language models and developing then the large language models. Then behind them are the developers of the large language models. Also the human writers of the medical myths. And finally are the networks of the participants who are being spreaded those medical myths, that participants who participated this research and spreading the medical myths to the networks of them. So actually those people may be affected by the medical myths, and especially the participants don't know they are spreading medical myths to the networks of participants. We find out there are short-term and long-term effects, especially regarding the purpose of research, that the people who are being spreaded those medical myths may be affected by them. And then large language models may generate better medical myths, which is 33% more spreadable than normal myths. And this would really create medical myths, large language models that are potentially harmful to the society. Okay, this is everything on this slide. For the phase 2, I wasn't in the phase 2, but I can summarize it. So we will need an ethical approval. Definitely, this research will need ethical review and ethical approval. And needs to describe the characteristics and distribution of this of the characteristics across stakeholder group, like subjects, miswriters, etc. Okay. Yeah, that's all from me.
Okay, let's thank our presenter, Donghan.
Hello, just a quick comment. Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, from a linguist perspective, right now we're working with indigenous communities in Brazil, and that's a problematic issue, what you call a myth, what you call belief, and what you called foundations, right? So for example, can you see the problem, right? So, and sometimes the problem is because whenever you refer to something that is not medically validated, you refer to it as a belief, right? And in this sense, I mean, how can we say from our perspective that these are beliefs and they are somehow less valuable than our Western medicine? So this is a very a very interesting issue, right? So again, I mean, as a linguist, I would like to call your attention to this thing, right? So what do we mean by myth, belief, right? And especially in my case, you know, I have to deal with, these are pregnant women. So they go to healthcare services in some places in Brazil. And they have a system of beliefs, right? And this system of beliefs is not the same as the one we have in Western medicine. And so there is a clash of beliefs there. And so you can imagine some of the consequences of this, right? And the very word myth and belief is problematic, right? So I think this is very interesting.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have group 2.
Hi. So my name is Gabrielle Godot, and I'm a PhD student from the University of Cambridge. And it turns out that we picked the same abstract as the previous group, so I'll just try to go over things that they didn't really go over. But just to reintroduce, so this is again on a study that tried to evaluate whether LLM-generated medical myths were more effective than human written ones. And so some of the things that we identified that were also seemingly like mentioned previously, but I think that we very much focused on was the mention at the end of the abstract that participants were spreading myths for up to 3 months after the experiments. And what isn't very clear from the abstract is that, is it a longitudinal study? Like, did they actually do some survey 3 months after? How did they actually evaluate that there is still spreading these myths 3 months after? And what we were really concerned is, obviously the risks seem to outweigh the benefits of the paper. So the paper's contribution seems very minimal compared to the risk of having people spreading these medical myths around them. Also, like, to the people that are around them that probably didn't sign up for the study, might not be aware that they even engaged in this study. And so we really, I think that was probably the thing of biggest concern. One other thing that I think the other group also mentioned, but there's not much information, the actual education of the participants. And, you know, they mentioned their medical background, but there's no mention of their education level, their native language, and all of these factors might very well contribute to how these medical myths might actually interact with their own personal beliefs, with their own cultural beliefs, and like how they end up spreading this. and the implications of those medical myths might affect people differently. We also, I think, got stuck a bit on the term traditional healthcare, which I think, again, a bit like with the word medical myths, traditional is seeing medicine from one very specific, assuming some kind of common ground, when obviously medicine is very diverse, and what constitutes a medical myth might in other medicines not really be considered a myth. And I think we also, I think same concern over like, were ever informed that the myths were actually myths? When were they informed? And one thing that someone mentioned is the fact that if they were only informed that the myths they were given were actually myths 3 months later, it might already be too late. You can't really cancel this form of misinformation. 3 months later, it's already stuck in their brain. Someone mentioned that a similar phenomenon is happens when you deal with propaganda. When you see some information and it has time to stay in your brain, even if you 3 months later are told that it's not true, it's very hard to actually debunk this in your head, and you might still believe that to some level some of it was true. And so in this, we very much focus on the participants themselves and how this might affect them, and also their entourage, so the people that they would have interacted with within those 3 months. And we also thought about medical staff having to maybe interact with those people and trying to, face what these people had then been told, as well as patients that might actually be affected by the disease or whatever the medical myths actually contained, and having to face more stereotypes related to those medical myths might also be an issue. And we were also concerned about like the research community, like trying, if this kind of paper is published, seeing this methodology, trying to replicate the methodology, trying to use the prompts that were used, might also, negatively impact, I think, the research community. And so that comes into like the short terms and long terms effects. I think we were really concerned about the potential for misuse. I think the previous group mentioned how it might be used by companies to spread misinformation, but more generally, the methods or the prompts that might be used to generate those myths could potentially be reused, if they were in the wrong hands, to bad ends. I don't know how to say this. And another potentially positive, if the participants were properly educated at the end, the users might learn to mistrust LLMs if they were then told that what they'd been given was actually generated from LLMs, and depending on how the generation actually happened. And when we looked at another abstract, I think it was abstract number 5, which was, I think, a corpus of different Latin American languages. And although there was not that much overlap, we did see that some of the concerns that were raised were things that we hadn't thought about in our own analysis. And one of it was, if they indeed decided to release their medical myths data, which is another source of concern, but if they did, there's no mention of the data license that they might need to do that. How the participants were remunerated is never mentioned, and that's also an issue. And the fact that those medical myths, exactly how they were generated, and also both for the human writers and the LLMs, might reinforce existing myths around some medical disease, some conditions that might actually reinforce negative stereotypes, which might also be an issue. And we weren't really sure about that last question, because we were just debating exactly what we meant to talk about from the author's perspective, from an editor's perspective. So we don't really get to an answer. But yeah, that was us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriella. And so we'll take it out with group 1. Yeah. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Arne, University of Passau, and we had an abstract that was dealing with sentiment analysis, and the authors of this abstract claimed that sentiment analysis is not only dependent on the language, but also dependent on the culture. So they basically took, I think it was 7 different Spanish-speaking countries, and for each of them they fine-tuned a model for sentiment analysis.
and then said the results were much better than to have one general model. And they claimed that for those reasons, sentiment analysis is quite specific, culturally sensitive. So far, so good. Here's where the problems start. So what they did, they took data from open Telegram group chats, which, yeah, the data is available, you can access it, but this is far from an informed consent. The people were not aware that their data was being used, was being taken to train such a language model. And then they paid annotators from those respective countries with relatively low wage levels to do their annotations for them. Which they justified saying, yeah, we still paid them double the minimum wage, so it's fine, but like it was $4 per hour, so for their standards, which they probably had, it was still a pretty low price. And then they market their model by distributing it at a uniform price all over the world. So no matter where you are and what your level of income is, you had to pay the same price to use that model. So there's obviously a clear imbalance between their costs, which they justify by the wage level in the respective countries, and then their marketing strategy, which they're like, oh, it's so fair because we charge everyone the same, which obviously is not really fair, and it especially harms the communities where the data is taken from, the communities that are being affected, because then by extension they cannot really access those models that have been trained using their data. So there's that. And then the third point, which they added last, which we also consider problematic, is that they said that they sold this data to 3 different companies which used it for marketing purposes. So again, it is arguable how much of a purpose that serves for the community that is actually being affected, where the data is actually coming from. So in a sense, the idea, the picture that we get is they just take the data from the people without them even knowing it, then they train a model, and then they impose it on the people to try to sell them products that they don't even know if they want them. So this brings me to the next question. What stakeholders did we consider? Obviously, we have the research team that were training their model, that were selling their product. We have the companies using the technology for marketing purposes, and we have the affected communities, which don't really have any agency in all of that, but are the ones that are being affected the most in the end, I would argue. We couldn't really find a good answer for the third question, so we don't know if there's any clear short-term, any clear long-term effects. It's more of a gradual process, but we think having such fine-tuned models that essentially can work as a shibboleth sort of test, being like, okay, because you use those phrases, we identify you as Colombian or as Argentinian or as Venezuelan or whatever. This might reinforce stereotypes, this might reinforce biases, and by extension, because of differing marketing strategies, could influence people in the long term. So the other abstract we then had a look at was the first abstract that was presented by Sabine, I think was your name, right? Yeah. And we found it actually pretty cool because there are some parallels. What we thought about most was actually the point that in both cases we have a language model that is trained on detecting certain biases / stereotypes or even replicating them. And in your case, you had a model that was perfectly open source. They shared their code, they shared their data. And now we have the issue, is a model that is trained to produce racial slurs such a good thing to be out there in public? In our case, we have the opposite case, where they did not make anything public. In quite the contrary, they sold it, they turned a profit out of it. So in a sense, both is not really the ideal way to go. I think in both cases, you can argue that it doesn't really help the community that is being affected the most. So there's a mismatch of profit and risk involved. And yeah, that leads me to the last question. How would we construct ethical review? So obviously for such a study, we would enforce the authors to have an ethical approval by ethical commission board. The data, at least if they are already taken it from such a public source, has to be anonymized accordingly, that individual utterances, individual text snippets cannot be traced back to individual persons. Obviously, we would urge the authors to ensure fair labor conditions and definitely disclose all stakeholders and potentially competing interests. Thank you.